legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Monday night edition of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody is having a great day. Yes, for the second week in a row, there was no Sunday show. Last week was Mother's Day. This week, not going to lie, wife kind of had told me like months ago, hey, Torres, she doesn't call me Torres, but hey, May 19th, we got ourselves a baby shower that you better be at. Found out Saturday night that I was doing that, so no show on Sunday. We'll figure out next week after Memorial Day, but we're coming in on a Monday, and let me say this. I don't know if there's the big, like, oh my goodness, this is the craziest story topic to lead the show today, but we got about 4, 5, 6 topics that I'm fired to get to, and also a guest that I'm excited to get to. What we're going to talk about today is pretty straightforward. Couple things. One, Chaz Lanier, maybe the best player still in the transfer portal, maybe the best guard in the transfer portal. He is in the middle of a visit tour for the ages. BYU this weekend, currently at Kentucky, Tennessee on Tuesday. We'll discuss him. Where does he end up? From there, we will take a quick break. Louisville. We've had a lot of Louisville fans in the comment section saying, Torres, all you ever talk about is Kentucky and Cal and UConn and Bama and this and that. Well, we're going to give Louisville their flowers. Pat Kelsey picks up another marquee commitment over the weekend, and I really like how this Louisville roster is coming together. We'll hit on some other odds and ends from the weekend after that. I want to talk a little bit about more bad news for Brian Kelly. Colorado, Deion Sanders actually getting some good news over the course of the last couple days. And then we will get to what I think is a very fun interview with new DePaul head coach Chris Holtman. I've known Coach Holtman for years. He's the best, really good guy. And I'm excited to talk about him. I think DePaul's a fascinating program in the college basketball space. They've struggled. He does not hide from that. And I think we have a fun conversation about where they are, where he hopes to bring them. And I do think there is a lot to kind of monitor from that perspective. So busy show, fun show, great interview. Before we get started, a couple quick reminders. One, make sure you're subscribed. Subscribe on YouTube. Put on the notifications so you know when we're going live. Make sure to put on those notifications. Subscribe if you are not. Share with friends. The YouTube channel continues to grow, and we appreciate your support. Also, subscribe, rate, and review on Apple and Spotify. We appreciate your support. Also, one more note is that we are hitting kind of the fall. We're going to be ramping it back up towards football. If you or someone you know, I know it sounds like an America's Most Wanted ad. If you or someone you know, we are looking for some advertisers. So if you own a company, work for a company, think there's something that makes sense for the Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel, we're reaching hundreds of thousands of people across the country and across the world every single month. Feel free to hit me up, Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. With that said, it is Monday night. There is no more time to waste. So, how about this? Let's go ahead and get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, listen, bluntly, I'm just going to be honest, is that I was waiting all day Sunday, all day Monday for that lead topic that really grabs the world's attention. And oh my goodness, I cannot wait to talk about this. I don't know that there's a lead topic like, I don't know, Nick Saban retiring, Jim Harbaugh going to the NFL, John Calipari going to Arkansas, Mark Pope getting hired at Kentucky, whatever. But I do still think there's a lot of news from this past weekend. And one of the most important pieces of news in the transfer portal all spring long has really come over the last 3 to 4 days and 3 to 4 days going forward. That's because Chaz Lanier, who is one of the best players still in the transfer portal, played at North Florida this past year, averaged 19 points per game, 44% shooting from the three-point line. Well, guess what? His recruitment is coming down to the wire. His recruitment should be done in the next probably 48 to 72 hours as he took a visit to BYU this previous weekend. He is currently, as I record on Monday night, on a visit to Kentucky, is expected to visit Tennessee on Tuesday. And we assume that we're going to get a commitment here sometime by Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon at the latest. So let's go ahead and dive in. Let's go ahead and talk about this guy because I do believe that he is both one of the best players to enter the portal this offseason, but more importantly, I think he's kind of an important piece for all three teams that are currently recruiting him. So I want to talk about how he could potentially fit with each, but then also where I actually think his recruitment stands. First of all, in terms of the player, just mentioned it, 6'4" guard from North Florida. And, really just an interesting player. And we've talked a little bit about him here over the course of these last couple weeks. But he is a player that really essentially over the course of the early part of his college career really just did not see a ton of action. He was a guy that, and it's still kind of mind-boggling to see this all on paper, but his first 3 years at North Florida, 1.7 points a game, 4.5 points per game, 4.7 points per game. That was before the 2023-2024 season when he averaged 19.7 points per game, 44% shooting from three. And so when you look at who he is, now he went through the NBA draft process. I'll be honest, it wasn't the greatest process for him. But at the same time, it wasn't the greatest process for him necessarily. But, what I will say about it is pretty straightforward, is that while he didn't have a great draft process, while he probably isn't quite ready for the pros, that doesn't mean that he can't have a major, major, major impact on college hoops next year and the three teams that are recruiting him. And bluntly, I kind of think he's a guy that all three teams could really use right now at this moment. And I think because of it, he's a very important player. Now, listen, I don't know if he's a player that, in my opinion, is going to be I don't know that he's going to be like a Dalton Connect kind of guy, first team All-American, 1 year at whatever college he chooses. But I do think he has a chance to be very, very, very good. I think he has the chance to be like a 15, 16 point a game scorer in the SEC or the Big 12. And I also think on any given night, potentially the kind of guy that could get you 23, 24 and lead you to a victory. Now, in terms of his recruitment, a couple things. One, first off, he did just finish up a visit, or he did take a visit over the weekend to BYU. And what I'll say about BYU is that I think because of how the offseason has played out, because there's so much excitement about the previous BYU head coach at Kentucky, and there's so much interest in the previous Kentucky coach at Arkansas, I don't think that people fully appreciate what BYU has quietly done this offseason. They bring in a guy named Kevin Young, he was a former Phoenix Suns assistant coach. He was a very well-respected assistant coach in the NBA. I think he was actually interviewing for NBA head coaching jobs. And basically what happened was BYU's number one booster is actually the owner of the Utah Jazz. And he was the chicken man of Provo, Utah, okay? He basically said, let's go get the guy that I want, and we're going to give them whatever we need to fund this program to put them in position to have the highest levels of success. So you bring in this Kevin Young guy from the NBA. He has an NBA background. I actually think he's done a very good job of quietly keeping together this roster. Now, he hasn't kept everybody. Obviously, Ali Khalifa's gone to Louisville. Noah Waterman's gone to Louisville. We'll talk about Louisville here in a minute. And he's lost a couple guys here and there. But you look at where BYU was. You look at how quickly this roster could have completely fallen apart. They've actually done a good job of keeping it together. Some of their best players, Richie Saunders, entered the portal, visits Kentucky, decides to go back to BYU. Trevin Nell, Dallin Hall, Fus Traore. These are all really good players from a BYU team that made the NCAA tournament. They all decide to come back to BYU. I have heard that there might still be a few irons in the fire for BYU outside of Chaz Lanier. I think if Jackson Robinson does come back to college, I think they're more of a factor than maybe a lot of people think. But I bring it up because the one thing that they really are missing is a dude that can put the ball in the basket consistently on like a 16, 17 point a night per night kind of guy. And so because of it, I would say Chaz Lanier is as important to BYU as he is to either Kentucky or Tennessee, even though Kentucky and Tennessee are really the two schools that are getting most of the buzz in terms of his recruitment. Now, in terms of Kentucky, he is on a visit to Kentucky right now. And listen, it wouldn't be the first time this offseason that Mark Pope gets a kid to campus and gets him committed before he decides to go anywhere else. But obviously, it also goes without saying, this is kind of a kid that is a priority for Kentucky right now. Bluntly, I think I like the Kentucky roster maybe a little bit more than most people in the media. And as I've said many times, I don't criticize other media members. Everyone is entitled to their opinion. I still have Kentucky right now as a top 15 or so team. I also don't think that this second they have the dude that can go ahead and just get them 28 on any given night. Now, I don't think Chaz Lanier is a guy that's going to get 28 every night. Nobody in college basketball really is. But I also do think it is one of those situations where, like, if you can get him and you can plug him in with the group that you already have, if he can get you 15, 16 a night, probably be your leading scorer. And he also fits in very nicely with a lot of the other pieces they already have. Would fit nicely alongside Lamont Butler in the backcourt. Would fit nicely alongside Otega Owa if you want to go to a smaller 3-4 guard lineup. Would fit nicely with Andrew Carr at the 4, with Amari Williams at the 5. So obviously we know the value he brings to Kentucky. And also, we know the potential value he could bring to Tennessee as well. And so it's been interesting because Tennessee was really, when he first entered the portal, it felt like he was Tennessee's to lose. He's from Nashville. Everybody assumed that he was headed to Tennessee. It was all a formality. Things have changed, but they do, to the credit of Rick Barnes, find themselves in the mix late in the process. Again, he's from Nashville. And I think for Tennessee, there is a fit and an importance in his recruitment as well. You need to replace some of the scoring that you had with Dalton Knecht last year. Now you bring in the kid from Hofstra, Darling Star Dunbar, or however you say his name. I know I'm going to trip over his name. Vols fans are going to crush me for it. I get it. But that kid averaged 20 a game at Hofstra, really good player. But I don't think you can ever have enough scoring in this era. Matter of fact, I do kind of wonder, like, is it at all possible that Rick Barnes had his Dan Hurley moment last year, where Dan Hurley 3-4 years ago realized, I can't win every game 63-61. I need to focus more on offense. Well, Rick Barnes brings in Dalton Knecht. All of a sudden, he can win a game 86-81, and every game doesn't have to be a rock fight. And so I do still think they're looking to add more offense, and I do think he's a priority recruit for Tennessee. So he's clearly important to all three schools. What's interesting is I was doing some snooping around, talking to some people that I like and respect over the course of the last couple of days. And I think you talk to different people, you get different answers on where he's leaning. It's funny. I talked to somebody pretty close to BYU late last week. Now, this was before the visit, but they said, look, we kind of feel like we're a distant third. We get it. We know he's from Nashville. We know there's ties to Tennessee. We know Kentucky's Kentucky. And I think they thought, hey, if we can get him to campus, maybe some things will change. And I heard from some people I respect in the recruiting world that now BYU thinks they're in very good shape. Now, I can't confirm that, but I'm just here to say there are BYU people that actually feel like they're in better shape than people realize. Still think ultimately it's probably a Kentucky-Tennessee thing. And I'm just curious. I guess what I would say is this, is I would probably at this particular moment, it's 6:20 Eastern time on Monday night. I'd probably give the slight edge to Kentucky at this moment. Now, what's going to be interesting is pretty straightforward. Do you get him committed while he's on campus? Because that to me is the fascinating thing. You let him off campus. And by the way, I think the kid plans on taking all 5 visits. But obviously, in a perfect world, you blow him away. You blow him away with fit, with style of play, with everything that you're doing, with how he fits. I didn't even mention alongside Kobe Brea as well. And you sit there and say, well, wait a second now. Do you really need to go to Tennessee? Come here, be a star. You're the missing piece, whatever. Now, obviously, if he gets off campus and he goes to Tennessee, and my understanding is that as of 6:19 Eastern time, that is still the plan, then that changes things. Because Tennessee has just as big of a role to offer as you do. Tennessee, listen, if it comes down to a couple dollars and cents in NIL, we know Tennessee will find out a way. And oh, by the way, you're from Nashville. You have a big role. You're coming off an Elite Eight appearance. And you have the last opportunity to make an impact as well. So to me, this is an absolutely fascinating recruitment. As of this particular moment in time, I would probably lean Kentucky. But I'm here to say just an interesting recruitment here in late May. We are now in late May, by the way, which is crazy. And by the way, we are going to keep you updated on all the portal stuff. NBA draft deadline is next week. So obviously some guys are going to decide to come back. Chaz Lanier is already back. And, if a Coleman Hawkins comes back or Jackson Robinson, we'll keep you updated. But Chaz Lanier is the big one right now. And I'll be curious to see if Kentucky can get him committed, if Tennessee can get him committed, or if he takes a deep breath, takes a step back after taking all three of those visits. But fascinating recruitment, very interesting stuff. All right, this is what we're going to do. Going to go ahead and take a quick break. Appreciate everybody tuning in here on a Monday night. A little bit of a slower time of year, but that's okay. We're going to take a quick break, come back. When we come back, do want to talk about another program that a lot of their fans have been in the comments of late saying, Torres, you're not giving us any credit. That's the Louisville Cardinals, who I think have had a phenomenal spring under new head coach Pat Kelsey. We'll take a quick break. How good can Louisville be? Quick break. Be right back. Before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what. Do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more. All available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. Mora Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Deion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions @gmail.com. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So first of all, terrible throw to break on my part, but I appreciate everybody's support. By the way, if you have ordered any t-shirt, it will be in the mail no later than Tuesday morning. Made a run today. We got our another round of shirts via my printer. We got some Hope and Popes. We got some Big Pig Invasions. We even got some Mike effing Woodson. So if you have ordered any shirt over the last couple weeks, it's coming here soon. Let's stay in college hoops. Let me make a little bit of a confession here. I've been getting cyberbullied the last couple weeks, but it's not the normal cyberbullying. Sometimes it's really negative. Oh, Torres, you're an idiot. Torres, you're this. Torres, you're that. No. Not right now. Not this time. In this case, a fan base that I don't think used to like me very much, that is the Louisville Cardinals. They have been in the comment section saying, Torres, you're talking so much about Calipari in Arkansas. You're talking so much about UConn, the two-time national champions. You're talking so much about Mark Pope and the Kentucky Wildcats. When are you going to give credit to us and our school and everything that our coach, Pat Kelsey, has done? And so, Louisville fans, I'm here to make amends. First of all, I'm very glad that we can talk about your school in a positive light. I think everybody thinks that I'm an anti-Louisville guy. I'm not anti-Louisville. I love the city of Louisville. Been many times. But there hasn't been a lot of bright spots to talk about. But I will readily admit that I probably haven't talked enough about Pat Kelsey and enough about the job that he has done this offseason in putting together just an unbelievable first roster at the University of Louisville. And we spent so much time talking about Mark Pope. We've spent so much time talking about John Calipari. It is time to talk about Pat Kelsey and talk about the Louisville Cardinals because they got another commitment this weekend. They've gotten 3 in the last week. And I believe with everything that they've done, Louisville, in my opinion, is right around the top 25 team, is also, I think you can make the argument, maybe the third best team in the ACC behind only Duke and North Carolina. And I believe they are certainly headed to their first NCAA tournament since 2019, when the Field of 68 is announced next year and next March. So let's get into Louisville and let's get into the news of the weekend, okay? So the news of the weekend, it wasn't the biggest piece of news, but it was the one that I was like, okay, I can't keep ignoring these Louisville Cardinals, okay? But over the weekend, Louisville did get a pretty big commitment from a kid by the name of Noah Waterman. If the name sounds familiar, it's because I just mentioned it about 5 minutes ago. Played at BYU for Mark Pope last year, entered the transfer portal, and, listen, I think he considered a few different things, considered maybe a little bit of a trip to Kentucky, maybe considered a return to BYU, but he enters the portal and he commits to the University of Louisville. And you look at who he is and you look at what he does. First of all, very good player. And the one thing about BYU last year, Mark Pope plays a lot of guys, a lot of minutes. So you can't just look at points per game, rebounds per game, assists per game. You have to look at points per game, rebounds a game, assists per game in the context of over the course of a 40-minute game. Because a lot of these guys were only playing 18, 19, 20, 21 minutes, and that was the case of Noah Waterman. So how about this? He is a player that in 21 minutes of game action averaged 9.5 points per game, 5 rebounds per game. He's 6'11" and shot 37% from behind the three-point arc. So that ain't bad, especially when you extrapolate it out over the course of a per 40. You're talking about like 18.5 points or 19 points per game, whatever it ends up being. 10 boards and 37% three-point shooting. That is phenomenal. And he is an excellent college basketball player. And I think when you add it in with what Pat Kelsey has done this offseason, it, to me, again, speaks to a top 25 team. First of all, in terms of the players prior to the commitment this weekend, let's just go through really quick who they got. First off, love this commitment. Talked about it in real time. This commitment happened feels like a lifetime ago. Terrence Edwards Jr., guard, played at James Madison. Remember, James Madison made the NCAA tournament. They beat Wisconsin in the opening round of the Big Dance. Terrence Edwards Jr. was their best player. Remember, they won 31 games, by the way, this year, maybe 32. I think it was actually 32. Won 32 games. Terrence Edwards Jr. was their best player, 17 points, 4.5 rebounds, 3.5 assists per game. He is a guy that, in my opinion, could play pretty much anywhere in college basketball, okay? He is a guy that I don't care if he played in the Sun Belt last year. That is a dude that is a high major player. I think he's going to be really good. I think he's going to be one of the better guards in the ACC. Know who else I think is going to be a really good guard? Chucky Hepburn, transfer from Wisconsin. He was a guy that 2 seasons ago was really his breakout, but a 3-year starter at Wisconsin. So if you can play 3 years in the Big Ten, I know we make fun of the Big Ten a little bit and how good is it really and blah, 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 and this and that. But at the same time, you can play 3 years in the Big Ten, you can play in the ACC, and you could be a star. 2 years ago was probably his best season, 12.5 points per game, 3 assists per game, 40% shooting from beyond the three-point arc. This year took a little bit of a step back, and I think that was more because they just had more talent around. Remember, they brought in A.J. Storr, who was since transferred to Kansas, but Chucky Hepburn this year still was a very good player, averaged right around double figures, and the assist totals were up even though the scoring was down. So that, to me, already is one of the better backcourts in the ACC. You could handle the ball, play on the ball, play off the ball, whatever. But then you look at some of the other pieces that Pat Kelsey has added as well. Worth noting, he's brought 3 guys with him from College of Charleston. That's where he came from. I really like that move. Guys that understand his culture, how he wants to play, how he wants to do things. Really no different than John Calipari bringing Big Z and Adu Thiero and maybe DJ Wagner to Arkansas. So you have those 3, plus Hepburn, plus Terrence Edwards Jr. You add Ali Khalifa, another BYU guy. So how about that, first of all? Pat Kelsey bringing more guys to Kentucky from BYU than the actual Kentucky coach Mark Pope, who coached him last year. But Ali Khalifa, who will sit out this year, Abubakar Traore, really good player from Long Beach State, had 14 points and 15 boards against Arizona in the NCAA tournament this year. And then the last week was when I think Pat Kelsey hit overdrive. We mentioned, obviously, Noah Waterman this week. But before that, Kayshawn Pryor, remember, 6'10", forward, South Florida. This guy was crazy coveted. Arkansas wanted him bad. Arkansas did not get him because he commits to Louisville. Now, maybe he committed to Louisville a little bit because of the fact that they missed out on Great Osabor, they missed out on Jaden Quains, they had a little bit of extra NIL money. Doesn't change the fact that he is a really good player. He's not the traditional 5. He's really a stretch 4, stretch 5. Shoots the ball very well, 35% from 3, even as a 6'10" guy. Averaged 13 and 8 for a very good South Florida team last year. And I thought this was an important one. Kahini Boots. I'm tripping over his name here. I just had it in front of me and I lost it. But the Boots kid, he was the 4-star kid who was committed to what's his face? He was committed to Michigan and Juwan Howard. He commits to I can't believe I tripped over this kid's name because now it's going to kill me that I messed up this kid's name. I feel so bad. Let's get this right before I forget. I had it written down and I had it written out phonetically, and now I'm just mad that I butchered the name. But we know who I'm talking about. The kid who was committed to Michigan. Everyone's going to be mad because I ruined the name. Whatever, you get the point. But he's a top 40, top 50 kid. I think he can develop very nicely over the course of the next couple of years. I cannot believe I tripped over his name. It's going to kill me. So give me a second because I'm actually very mad that I missed this kid's name. So let me make sure that I get this right here. Give me half a second here. Kahani Roos. Okay. I'm sorry. Kahani Roos. Okay. I apologize. Couldn't figure out the name. Whatever. Forgive me. You get the point. Top 30, top 40 player, was committed to Michigan. I think he's a very good long-term player. I've seen him a ton on film, seen him a little bit in person. He's a very good player. Anyway, now that I destroyed that poor kid's name, let's talk a little bit about the team because I really like this team going into next year. You have a team that I think, bluntly, I think Pat Kelsey's done as good as John Calipari in Arkansas, as Mark Pope and Kentucky, as any of these new head coaches, because what he's brought is a lot of different variables. First of all, he's just upgraded the roster across the board. Now, Kenny Payne did have some talented players last year, didn't really work out for obvious reasons, but much like Mark Pope, I like how all the pieces fit. Like I said, one of the better backcourts in the ACC with Terrence Edwards Jr., with Chucky Hepburn. Then on top of that, you have Pryor, who's not really a 5. Like I said, he's more of a stretch guy, but really good player. A lot of people wanted him. You have Noah Waterman, really good player. A lot of people wanted him. You have the Roos kid, whose name I can't pronounce. A lot of people wanted him. And so you just go on and on down the list. I'm telling you, I look at rosters all day, every day, all spring long. I don't think there's very many teams in the ACC that are better than them. Now, North Carolina, obviously bringing back RJ Davis, that's a different deal. Number 1 seed, bring back a lot, have 2 McDonald's All-Americans, Ian Jackson, Drake Powell. Okay, I get it. They're probably better. Duke with Cooper Flagg, all the guys they're bringing in, they're better. But after that, tell me who's better than Louisville on paper right now. Tell me who is better than Louisville on paper right now in the ACC. Like Wake Forest, especially if Hunter Salas comes back. But if Hunter Salas doesn't, they could be in trouble. And even if he does, Steve Forbes, you got to prove to me at some point that you can get over the hump. Clemson's good, but the run last year, can they maintain it? I don't know. NC State is good, but the run was a little bit fluky. Let's be honest. If they lose in the ACC tournament, nobody's talking about them this year. I like some of the pieces that Georgia Tech, of all teams, has brought in with Damon Stoudemire. But at the same time, doesn't change the fact that none of those teams on paper are better today than Louisville is. So credit to Pat Kelsey, credit to the Louisville Cardinals. You guys deserve some praise on this show. And today, you're going to get it. And oh, by the way, I do apologize from the bottom of my heart for tripping over that poor kid's name. Let's get to a couple other notes. As always, please drop in any questions or comments. Producer Matt will get to them momentarily. Kahani Bruce, I already see a lot of people in the comment section like, Torres, how did you butcher that name so bad? But anyway, Connie Roos. Yes, Connie Roos. Okay, let's get to a couple other stories from the course of the weekend. Listen, I've said it a few times. First of all, love this time of year. And I think what we're going to do, like I said, we're going to start branching out for some college hoops. A couple things caught my attention outside of the college hoop space that I just want to talk about. Now, what I like about this show, we don't always have to hit on the topics that everybody else is. Like, I don't really find Scotty Scheffler that interesting. That happened on Friday with the arrest. The Harrison Butker thing, I hate to be rude. I didn't really find what he said that offensive. He was speaking at a Christian college. I don't think what he said was perfect, but keep in mind, he did reference, by the way, the roles that men play in the household. Like the Harrison Butker thing was so overblown. So we're not going to talk about all the other stuff. If you want PGA Championship coverage, you can go somewhere else, although I know it was a great weekend at Valhalla for so many of you who were there. But I did see a couple other things, college football related, that I want to get to in a minute. And as I mentioned, Chris Holtman, the new head coach at DePaul, will be here momentarily. Before we do, can I go on a little bit of a random rant? A little bit of a random rant here, okay? This is very off topic, but it drove me crazy when I saw this story over the course of this weekend, okay? So I don't think we've ever talked really WNBA on this show. Now, we may have we talked a little Brittany Griner when that whole thing was going down. Haven't talked much WNBA. And I think we talked Caitlin Clark once during the season, and I just don't really care that much about Caitlin Clark, to be honest. Like, no disrespect. Grew up in Connecticut, grew up around UConn women's basketball, so it's not like I don't like women's basketball. The Caitlin Clark story wasn't as moving for me as it was for everybody else. But can I say this? Really, since the college basketball season ended, I've really kind of seen nothing but complaints about the WNBA, from the WNBA, about Caitlin Clark, basically about everything, okay? And so I want to get to a story that happened in the WNBA this week because it drove me crazy and it's going to get me fired up. But did you see this story with the Las Vegas Visitors Bureau? Basically, let me make sure I get this right, okay? So the Las Vegas, let's see here. What is this? I tripped over that name. All right, let's see if I can find this story really quick. Okay. So let's find this story, because this story, I mean, this was like unbelievable. Okay. So like I said, since Caitlin Clark is to come to the WNBA, it's been a lot of negativity around Caitlin Clark and pretty much everything. Caitlin Clark doesn't get paid enough. Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever. How can they be traveling on coach? We have to change all the rules for her, okay? So basically, all I've heard about the WNBA from WNBA players, coaches, fans, media, whatever, is how unfair it is, how unfair, why don't they get more, blah, 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 blah. Why do I bring it up? Well, because there was a story over the course of the last couple days that caught my attention and really kind of made me mad, okay? And so it comes involving the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. They have kind of gotten the message about the WNBA and about, supporting women's basketball. And so on Saturday, late Friday, we got this announcement that the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority went ahead and gave $100,000 to each player on the Las Vegas Aces. And so I saw the headline, thought it was pretty cool, blah, 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 blah. That's great. Congrats to those girls, two-time champions. A local business steps up. That's awesome. Then on Saturday night, I was getting ready to do my show, and I saw a report from ESPN that said WNBA investigating Aces deal with Vegas Tourism Authority. And I guess the idea is that because everyone in the league, that because only the Las Vegas Aces have gotten this deal where each player gets paid $100,000, other players, other teams have complained about this deal to the WNBA. They are now investigating, to which I say, WNBA, can you stop complaining about everything? Okay, so like, this is so crazy to me because, like I said, all we've seen for the last 3 months is all negative. Caitlin Clark doesn't get paid enough. They don't travel well enough. Get them first-class flights. Get them commercial. Get them chartered flights. Now a local business steps up and is going to pay each player $100,000. And ultimately, the complaint from the league is pretty straightforward. it is like, well, wait a second now. As we know, most players in the league don't make $100,000 in salary. And so I guess in theory, what the league wants to make sure of is if this endorsement deal stays on the table, they don't want every free agent wanting to go to Las Vegas, okay? And they think it's a competitive disadvantage, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And I don't even know if I'm presenting this story well, but the idea that it is somehow a negative, that a local business has stepped up and offered to pay all these players $100,000, it boggles my mind. And it just speaks to, I don't even think the WNBA knows what it wants anymore, okay? Because at the end of the day, all it's been is complaint. Here it is, a local business stepping up. And oh, by the way, if you're another team in the league and you don't have that deal available to you, here's an idea. Go ahead and find it somewhere else. I'm not saying everybody's going to get $100,000 per player, but you mean to tell me some business in Indiana won't step up and give the Fever some money to be affiliated with the team, or the Connecticut Sun, which, oh, by the way, plays in a casino? You mean to tell me the casino can't come up with some money for them? But it just, I saw this story and it drives me crazy because all I hear about is how unfair it is for the WNBA and it's so unfortunate, it's so this and it's so that. Well, now somebody steps up and it's still a problem. WNBA, figure it out. This is embarrassing. By the way, we don't see that in any other sport. LeBron James living in LA, he has certain perks that Giannis living in Milwaukee doesn't. I have not heard Giannis complaining that he's not 20 minutes from the Warner Brothers studio, that they haven't made a Space Jam movie about him. It just, I saw this story. It drove me crazy. I could not believe it's a real headline. The WNBA won't stop complaining about everything. Don't even know if I sold that story well. Doesn't make sense. Two quick college football stories, and then I do want to get to some of your questions. Drop your questions below. And also then want to get to Chris Holtman, the new head coach at DePaul, who I think you'll really enjoy this interview. We'll get to some of the preview of it in a minute, but Chris Holtman's a great guy, and I think he's actually going to do pretty well at DePaul, a place that obviously has struggled historically. So a couple other college football notes. The first one, so we talked a lot about Brian Kelly. I guess it would have been 2 weeks ago with his comments about NIL. Now, I thought his comments about NIL were kind of blown a little bit out of proportion. I didn't think they were that big of a deal. But of course, everybody freaked out because it's Brian Kelly and they don't like Brian Kelly. Okay. Now, I will admit, didn't necessarily look the best. And I will admit, Brian Kelly has not had a great spring, really following last year in which he kind of struggled on the field. LSU goes whatever they do, 10-3. They go 10-3, but the defense is terrible. They replaced the whole defensive staff and really just weren't able to get guys out of the transfer portal this spring. I believe, I could be mistaken, I don't think they took I think they just took their first player out of the portal in the last couple of days after missing on several guys, including the guy that led to the comment about NIL. Well, I bring it up because Brian Kelly got more bad news over the last couple of days because this happened on Friday. It's a little bit old, but I figured it's at least worth mentioning. And that's because on Friday, Brian Kelly had the number one wide receiver in America, DeCorian Moore, was committed to the LSU Tigers. As a matter of fact, that was the one thing Brian Kelly kind of had going for him at this moment in time. Actually had a very good 2025 recruiting class lined up. Number one quarterback in America, Bryce Young. Number one running back in the country, Harlem Berry. And then the number one wide receiver in DeCorian Moore. That was at least until Friday when DeCorian Moore officially decommitted. Now, we'll get into, we're not going to spend a ton of time on his recruitment, but I just bring it up to say, poor Brian Kelly cannot catch a break. And I do think this is kind of just a tough break for him at a moment in time when he really couldn't afford to get some bad PR. So DeCorian Moore was the number one wide receiver in America. And, listen, I think the more that I really kind of think about this, the more that a couple things stand out. First of all, in the grand scheme, not that big of a deal. Yes, he's a 5-star, but you have time to remake up ground. You also have time to plug the hole, to find other guys, whatever. But at the same time, it is a negative headline. And I do think it speaks to, things aren't very good for Brian Kelly right now. To me, though, the bigger story, I guess I would say, is that I look at this, and I was thinking about this when I saw the headline. Unless you're a quarterback, or unless you're like a 3-star guy that frankly just doesn't have the opportunities that other guys do. I just don't understand why you would commit this early. So DeCorian Moore is a 2025 kid, which means that he will sign and enroll in January of next year. He committed last June. He committed about a year ago now to LSU coming off his sophomore year of high school. And bluntly, I just don't get why any player would commit that early in the process. The bottom line is, I was thinking about this. Think about how much college football has changed just in the last year. Just in the last year, think about everything that has happened. A year ago today, this is what the college landscape looked like. Nick Saban was at Alabama. Jimbo Fisher was at LSU. Jim Harbaugh was at Michigan. On the opposite side of things, I don't think most people really knew who Kalen DeBoer was. Oh, he's that guy, Washington. I don't really know much about him. Now he's the Alabama coach. I don't think most people knew who Mike Elko was. Now he's the Texas A&M coach. Texas was like, will they ever be good again? Now they might be the preseason top 3, top 4 team in the country behind only Georgia and Ohio State. Ryan Day, by the way, a year ago was like, he's going to be okay. They'll beat Michigan one of these years. No, they lose to Michigan again. They get stomped by Missouri in the bowl game. Now all of a sudden Ryan Day is like persona non grata. So I just bring it up because I guess what I would say, and we have parents or recruits that listen to this show. If I was advising any 5-star, I would just say, don't commit till your senior year. Take all your visits and wait because stuff happens. Now, there's exceptions. If you are a 5-star quarterback, you can only take one quarterback per cycle per school. If you really want to go to Oregon and Oregon offers you, probably take that offer because it might not be there in a week. They might take somebody else. And like I said, if you're like a 3-star and Alabama is your dream school and you know that if you don't take the offer now, they're going to recruit right over you, then take the offer. But for a kid like DeCorian Moore, what's the point? Why are you committing June after your sophomore year when you got 18 months until you're actually going to enroll? A lot changes, a lot evolves. Even just like NIL from last year to this year has evolved. Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, those are believed to be the leaders. Think about those 3 schools. Texas has completely changed who they are. Ohio State's NIL has completely changed. Remember, a year ago it was, we don't overpay for kids. This is about whatever. Now Ryan Day's like, crap, I got to win some games that matter. And he's completely restructured his NIL. And then, oh, by the way, Oregon is Oregon. So I saw that story. I don't think it's the end of the world for Brian Kelly, but I do think it is a bad break at a moment in time in which he could not have one. Really quickly, one more college football story that I do want to get to. And it involves a guy that we talked about a lot over the course of the fall last year. That is Coach Prime, Deion Sanders. And so just to be clear, I actually kind of like Coach Prime. 1, I think he's kind of refreshing. 2, I like the honesty. I like the candor. Bluntly, I don't agree with everything he does. I don't think it's the perfect way to build a team, taking, essentially, basically, even this offseason, which has been quieter than last offseason, taking like 30, 35 transfers between the spring cycle, between the winter cycle and now the spring cycle. I don't mind him. I don't agree with everything. And I will say there's been a lot of noise coming out of Colorado over the last couple months. A lot of more kids enter the portal. Now, they did get a fair number of kids in their own right. And I've largely stayed away because I think, everybody's kind of piling on, whatever. But I saw a piece of news because I do think that when we talk about Colorado, everybody's talking about, oh, it's over for Deion, and oh, it's over for Coach Prime, and oh, it was whatever. And then I saw something that made me realize, you know what? He's still actually doing pretty well for himself and probably better than people are giving him credit for. And that is because on Monday, I saw a headline that for the 2nd straight year, Colorado has completely sold out of its season ticket allotment. Keep in mind, before Deion got there, they hadn't sold out their season ticket allotment in 27 years. They have now done it 2 years in a row. And it makes me realize, as much noise as there is on the internet, things aren't nearly as bad at Colorado as people think they are, in large part because I don't think Colorado is nearly as bad as people want them to be, okay? And so first of all, when I look at Colorado, I'll go back to what I've said really since September, October of last year. I think Colorado actually overachieved last season. You can agree. You can fight with me. We know how things started. We know how things ended. They started 3-0. Everybody's going crazy. They beat Colorado State in overtime. I think there was like 11 million people watching at 2 a.m. Eastern time or whatever it was when they beat Colorado State on that Saturday night. And the hype was a little bit crazy. And then they struggled from there. They go 1-9 down the stretch. They 1-8 down the stretch. They finish 4-8 overall. The only wins against Arizona State. And there were certainly some interesting games. Get blown out by Washington State, get blown out by Oregon. You have the 29-0 lead against Stanford and you end up losing. And so it certainly wasn't perfect. But let's also call a spade a spade. He took over the worst roster in Power 5 football at this time last year. Now we're down to Power 4. He completely flipped it, and the over-under win total was 3.5. He hit the over, which by definition means he did better than people were expecting. Didn't end the way that he wanted, but I don't think you can argue that he overachieved relative to expectations. And so one, always thought that they were kind of better than people gave him credit for. Because again, people were talking about them as a 0-win team, as a 1-win team. They ended up winning 4 games. They ended up beating the reigning national runners-up in TCU. They beat a good Nebraska team. They beat a good, not a very good Arizona State team, but they did overachieve. So there's that. The other thing, which I think has kind of gotten completely lost in the shuffle, is that everybody talks about, well, they lost all of these guys to the transfer portal. And again, I'm not here to say that they didn't lose any guys that they wanted, because Deion did talk about this. He said in the spring, oh, we lost mostly backups, blah, 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 this and that. Okay, cool. And I know when he said that was early on, and they did lose some more guys after. Dylan Edwards, the running back, is a really good player. He's at Kansas State now. Amarion Cooper, the cornerback, started at Florida State, transfers to Colorado. He's back at Florida State. So they did lose some guys. But I also do think it's worth noting that they actually did bring in a lot of impact players as well. That's the thing that to me gets lost in the shuffle. Everyone's like, oh, look at all the players that are leaving. Well, are we ever going to acknowledge that he brought in a lot of really good players in the portal as well? And I've said this all offseason, is last year he took bodies to fill the roster. This year he actually took legitimately good players out of the portal. It's worth noting. If we're going to talk about all the players that left, you understand he got a running back from Ohio State that was, I think, their second or third leading rusher this year, Dallas Hayden. He took an offensive lineman from Texas. Early in the previous cycle, he took a 4-year starter from Indiana, Khalil Benson. He took a former 5-star edge rusher, Quincy Wiggins from LSU. He took the LeJante Webster kid who balled out in the spring game over 1,000 yards receiving from Florida Atlantic. So I just bring it up to say, if we're going to have an honest conversation about Deion, it can't be negative, because I do believe he overachieved last year. And I'll also say this. I think he's actually significantly upgraded the talent this year. Now it remains to be seen how this team does this year. And like I said, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that he is the perfect person and I agree with everything that he's done this offseason. I don't think it's healthy to try to bring in whatever, 30, 40, 50 guys in an offseason through the portal. I don't think it's healthy to take 6, 7, 8 high school recruits and everybody else through the portal. Yes, I do think you need a foundation of 20 to 25 high school recruits every year. Some of them aren't going to pan out. Some of them are going to transfer. But if you get 15, 20 to stay per class, that's a pretty good system in place. So I'm not here to say that he's perfect or that he's this or that he's that or that he's whatever. What I am here to say, though, is you start adding stuff up. It's not nearly as bad as everybody makes it out to be. Last season, they overachieved. The portal stuff is actually probably better than people give it credit for. Lose some good players going out. You brought back in a lot of good players coming in. The season ticket allotment has sold out. Oh, by the way, we talked about it last week. Game number 1, already on national TV, North Dakota State. That is going to be the Thursday opening night game. So we'll see how it happens. I would add, I think, probably a slightly easier schedule this year outside of the Pac-12. Remember, the Pac-12 was really tough last year. No Oregon, no USC. You replace them with teams that you should be competitive with. Kansas has improved under that new head coaching, that new coaching staff over the last 2-3 years. They're not invincible, though. Lance Leipold is a really good coach. They're not invincible, though. Chris Kleiman's a really good coach. Kansas State isn't invincible, though. Arizona's a really good program right now, but they have a first-year head coach after Jed Fish left. So I just bring it up to say I saw that piece of news. I think a lot of the Deion stuff is way, way, way over exaggerated. All right, just a minute. We're going to go ahead and get to an interview with Chris Holtman, the head coach at DePaul. Do we have any interesting questions, producer Matt, that are worth getting to? I saw somebody said that I needed to make a t-shirt that said always 5 minutes late to my live streams. I apologize. We do our best. Torres, we need Cards versus Cats t-shirts. So here's the thing. Who's going to buy that? Like Pamela says, get Cards versus Cats t-shirts. My question is, like, are Louisville fans going to wear something that has something that's Kentucky related? Is Kentucky fans going to wear something that has that has a Louisville Cardinal on it? That's my only concern. I will say, I do think that this rivalry is going to be on fire the next couple of years. I think they both got relatively young coaches, early to mid 40s that get what each school is about, get what the rivalry is about, get what running a program in 2024, 2025 is about. So I'm excited to see how this all comes together because I actually like both coaches. Pamela, if you can give me the hard sell on why we need Cards versus Cats t-shirts, I'm in. I'm just afraid, like I said, a Louisville fan isn't going to buy anything that says Kentucky on it, and a Kentucky fan isn't going to buy anything that says Louisville Cardinals on it. So that's that. Getting some water. Just keep the questions coming, Matt. Okay, Benjamin Bush says, watch BYU come in and get Chaz from Kentucky and Tennessee. I think I mentioned it during the segment. So, one, depending on who you ask, there's some people that actually think that that BYU's in better shape than maybe the average fan does. I don't know that I necessarily believe that, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. And the one thing that I will say, and I said this during the segment, but I mean it, BYU, listen, it doesn't have the history of Kentucky, and it doesn't have SEC football money like Tennessee. They are not lacking in the NIL department. I said this, if you missed it, if you're just joining the show, Chaz Lanier, really good portal player, visiting Kentucky, Tennessee, and BYU this week. Already visited BYU, at Kentucky right now, visiting Tennessee. And I think there's this thought, and I believe that BYU is in third place, but I think there's this thought that they're not even competitive in that space. That's not true at all. Like I said, they're basically being funded right now by the owner of the Utah Jazz. The owner of Utah Jazz is a huge BYU booster. He's the guy who placed the coach in place, and he is giving him every NIL resource needed to succeed. Found it kind of interesting. I was thinking about this because I saw that Hogs Plus, which is an Arkansas thing, put out an interview with John Tyson. It feels like we're entering an era, at least until we get collective bargaining with players, which I think is closer than people think. Is the biggest booster in every athletic department more powerful than the AD? Because the biggest boosters are paying the coaches' salaries, paying NIL, doing this, doing that. I think we might be onto something. I don't think BYU, it's a 0% chance that they could get Chaz Lanier, but again, I do think it's probably a little bit lower than a lot of people think. I don't think they're going to get him, but I don't think it's impossible, I guess is what I should say. Anything else? Producer, when is the next set of shirts getting shipped out? I got my Hope and Pope t-shirt order. Jared Shelton. It will be put in the mail tomorrow. Tomorrow, Tuesday. It'll be to you by the end of the week, early next week at the latest. We just got all the shirts in on Sunday, and everything will be in the mail by tomorrow. Literally have a bag full of shirts that need to be shipped. It's 4:00 Pacific time. I don't know that I'll get to the post office before it is time to get those out, but they will be out in the morning tomorrow. You'll have them by the end of this week. I know a lot of you bought them, by the way, for Father's Day and stuff. I know that's coming up. So we're going to make sure to get them out ASAP. If you have ordered by now, by 7:00 Eastern time on Monday, it will be in the mail by Tuesday midday. Okay. Good question from Elsie, who's actually a Kentucky fan. He says, Torres, I haven't heard much of anything about Musselman's players he got out of the transfer portal. Can you please touch on this? Are they good? Are they going to be good this coming season? So, LC, what I encourage you to do on Wednesday's show, the last live show we did was on Wednesday, was last Wednesday night. And I said, I gave my portal winners, and USC was one of those winners. And first off, let me say this. Before we even credit Coach Muss or anybody, I think we have to credit that administration, because I know the previous coaching staff, Andy Enfield, and I don't want to say they couldn't get players in, because they could, but there were certain restrictions on who they could get in and how aggressive they could be in the portal. And I'm sure this was part of Coach Muss's negotiating when he took the job, is he basically said, like, look, I'm going to have to flip this roster. I think they've actually done a very good job, all things considered. The other thing, too, I just mentioned it with BYU. USC has a lot of very prominent and wealthy boosters, but USC isn't like one of those rabid fan bases that if the AD or if the coach says, hey, we need this, and this, that the boosters are necessarily going to step up. I think USC, UCLA's like this. I don't think that they're super fired up to pay a bunch of guys that they don't know. Now, if a kid comes in, if he's a Matt Leinart or Reggie Bush and he's balling out, maybe that's a bad example. That was the pre-NIL era. But I think they're more willing to help guys that have already performed than just blindly pay for recruits. But I bring it up to say I actually think USC has done a very good job in this portal cycle. Desmond Claude, who's from my home state of Connecticut, played at Xavier the last couple years. Really good player. He averaged 15 points per game. Now, he's not much of a shooter, but he is headed to USC. I really like him. 16.5 points per game, like I said, only 24% shooting from three, but he's a very, very, very good player. St. Thomas, who was the leading scorer at Northern Colorado. Why that's noteworthy, who came from Northern Colorado last year, Dalton Connect. St. Thomas is headed to USC. They got a kid named Chibuzo Agbo, who's from Southern California originally. He played the last couple of years at Boise State. He was Boise State's leading scorer. Remember, Boise State made the first four of the NCAA tournament this year. So I think it's a very nice core. They added a shooter from UC San Diego named Bryce Pope. As producer Matt has just gotten in my ear, they actually added another player, Kevin Patton Jr. from the University of San Diego, just today. So I give Coach Muss credit. I think it's actually a very good class. I don't think it's the elite of the elite, but I do think I was worried about how many transfers he could get in and how committed USC fans would be on the NIL front. I think it appears as though he's done a good job on both fronts. Worth noting, of course, USC, like UCLA, is going to the Big Ten this year. So they got to ramp up the recruiting efforts because, listen, we can make fun of the Big Ten, but not only are those good teams, those are really tough road environments that USC, Washington, Oregon, and UCLA are going to go into. We can make fun of Indiana. That's a tough place to play. Purdue is a tough place to play. Wisconsin's a tough place to play. Iowa's a tough place to play. Illinois is a tough place to play. So I like what USC has done. I actually have them as like the fourth or fifth best team in the Big Ten next year, which is kind of crazy to think about, like the guys that they've brought in. Best fit for UK is Lanier or Robinson don't work out. It's a great question from Derek. Listen, that's where it gets interesting because Mark Pope, I think it was Feger, the assistant coach, said they plan on using all 13 of their scholarships. So if you miss out on both, it's clear that they feel like they need more scoring on the wing. If you somehow miss out on both, I don't even know who would be in the mix at that point. There's not a lot of guys that are in the portal that have not committed. Now, the Jalen Wells kid from Washington State, I think is really good, but I think he could stay in the draft. Arthur Kaluma. I'm not a huge Arthur Kaluma guy. I was for a couple years. I have not been as much after this past year at Kansas State. So there's not a lot out there. The one thing I'll give Mark Pope credit for is it feels like he kind of has a backup plan to a backup plan to a backup plan to a backup plan. And so I would be curious if Chaz Lanier goes through the process, visits Tennessee this week, and does not commit to Kentucky. I'd be curious to see what happens from there. I still think Kentucky's the favorite, so I'm not going to go too crazy on it. But here's the thing. I probably will have to talk about it at some point later this week because he's either going to commit to Kentucky or he's not going to commit to Kentucky. So we'll see what happens from there. But yeah, I do think that would be a little bit of panic mode time. I think that would be a little bit of panic mode time if you don't get either one of those guys. As weird as it sounds, even though Jackson Robinson played at BYU under Mark Pope, I think Chaz Lanier is more likely. I still think Jackson Robinson wants to stay in the NBA draft. Okay. Let's see here. KC, my guy. On UK's end, I wouldn't blame Chaz Lanier for going on his visit to Tennessee. It's in-state, and any kid would do that. Still highly likely he goes to Kentucky. So I actually happen to agree 100%. I happen to agree 100% because of the fact that, listen, Tennessee, I get it. I get why there were obvious ties there early, but I think the longer this has gone on, the more it feels like to me that Kentucky is the favorite. I understand why Tennessee was the favorite early, but we've talked about this a million times with these portal kids. There's so many guys that they go into the portal thinking they know where they want to go, and then stuff changes. Then all of a sudden they're hearing from schools that they never could have imagined they're hearing from. Look at somebody like Brandon Garrison. Brandon Garrison went into the portal the day that it opened with a no contact tag. That basically meant that he probably thought he knew where he was going. Then all of a sudden, all these schools are reaching out. John Calipari leaves for Arkansas. You go visit them. Kentucky gets this new head coach. You're interested in him. You end up committing to Kentucky. So I'm with Casey is that if I had to handicap this right now, I actually do think Kentucky gets Chaz Lanier. But to his point, I don't blame him one bit for taking a visit over to Tennessee. That's his home state school. The only thing you got to worry about, if you let him leave without a commitment, Tennessee can always come in over the top. If it's solely about NIL, they can always come up with more money. But also, last chance to make a first impression. That's where I'd be worried a little bit. What else we got, producer Matt? LC says he has subbed. I appreciate it. Thanks for answering my question. Going to binge watch your videos. I'm relatively new subscriber. Love your content. Well, I appreciate you, LC. Listen, we're grinding, man. It's kind of that time where, we're just trying to stay on top of everything. May is the slowest month, I would argue, on the college sports calendar. It's the rare month where most players aren't even on campus at this point of the year. And so we're doing our best. We'll get some more football. I squeezed some football in there. I don't know that I delivered it as well as I possibly could have, but I appreciate that. Go back, binge watch all my videos. Appreciate everybody's support. Producer Matt, anything else before we get out of here? I think we got one more maybe. By the way, I should make a shirt that says I'm 5 minutes late to every stream. What can I say? It's just who I am. Anthony Eason, why is Tennessee getting a 2-day visit and BYU and UK only getting one? Just how it goes sometimes. I mean, the thing you have to consider is what time is he getting out of Kentucky? I mean, he might not be getting to Tennessee until 5 o'clock at night. If he's not getting there till 5 o'clock at night, then all of a sudden, you want to stay over to see what you have to see. So I don't think that makes that much of a difference, to be perfectly honest. By the way, I think Mark Pope had some travel issues on Monday morning. So if that's the case, I'd be more worried about that than Tennessee getting the second day as opposed to Kentucky. All right. I'll tell you what. I think that is it for most of this episode of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. What I want to do now, we're going to do some more interviews over these next couple weeks as the news slows down. First of all, we're going to do some more interviews over the next couple weeks. And I have an interview that I think you're really going to like. So Chris Holtman is the new head coach, at DePaul. And we all know what DePaul has been, is whatever. But I don't believe that they're that far off from being relevant. And especially in this new world of the portal of NIL, anybody can get good with the right coach, the right NIL, the right this, the right that. So I brought on Chris Holtman. I've known him for years. We're going to have a very fun and interesting conversation about DePaul basketball, but also how do you rebuild one of the programs that has struggled more than anybody in major college basketball over the last couple of decades. He believes he can get them into the NCAA tournament sooner rather than later. We talk about that. We talk about Chicago as a sports city. What is it like? What would Chicago be like if they ever get good at basketball at DePaul? Talk a little bit about UConn as well. He has some very nice things to say about Dan Hurley and his team. So we're going to get to Chris Holtman in a minute. Before we do, as the ticker just told you, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. New videos going up every single day. Make sure you're subscribed. Also, go on Apple and Spotify, leave a 5-star review. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Make sure to follow on Twitter at Aaron_Torres, Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram, Aaron Torres Pod on TikTok, and that is all for today's show. Appreciate everybody's support. I will be back on Wednesday. We will figure out something to do for Wednesday's show. Something will probably pop by then. But that's it for this segment. Appreciate everybody's support. Shout out to Torrent Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, you F-head, unblock me, bro. Now, rather than wrapping the show, here is an interview with the new DePaul head coach, Chris Holtman. Guy I've known a long time. I don't know if we've ever had you on the podcast, but I'll tell you what, all the years I've been doing this, I've never seen a better backdrop on a podcast than the new head coach, DePaul University, the Chicago skyline in the background. Chris Holtman, what's going on, man? How you doing?
It's real too, right? It's real.
This
is not just a sheet here. This is a real thing here. It's a window and a real view.
It's not one of those fake Zoom backdrops. I have one of those that looks like I'm staying in a 4-star, 5-star resort or whatever that I use sometimes. People are like, Torres, where are you staying? No. That is real. Let me ask you this, first question. I mean, I know in this era, especially when you take over a program, you're putting in probably 18, 20, 20, whatever hour days. Have you had the chance to venture out into Chicago a little bit? Especially, I know this time of year, it's I told you before we started recording, man, it's the best city, my favorite place to visit in America. Have you had any time to kind of go around Chicago at all?
It's an amazing city, as you said. I didn't know you had such a connection to the place until we talked about it. It's an amazing city this time of year in the summer. I always felt like that. I started to take a few more trips up here. My wife and I, when we started working at Butler, we would come up for like a weekend. And then when I was in Columbus a couple times, love the city. We've been able to get out and explore a little bit, really through a lot of the recruiting visits.
Sure.
Have dinner downtown, or you're picking up the kid at the hotel, and it's in the city. But we're just beginning to like build or find a house and all that kind of stuff. We're just in the process of that. This is a temporary. I was in a hotel for about, and this from talking to coaches, the transition. So when you get hired, you go to the press conference and then you stay there until really, your family comes, basically. Maybe you'll be able to go back and see your family, but you're in that city for the duration. So they put you in a hotel for a period of time, 3 or 4 weeks. You're in there for 4 weeks. We were doing staff meetings as I was building the staff in like my hotel room. We bought this whiteboard and brought it in, and this easel, and we were, putting up, at the time we had like 3 players we knew we had, and we were kind of, going from there. And then they give you temporary housing for like a month or two. And they put me in this condo, which has this incredible view.
That was going to be my next question. I mean, taking over in this era, I feel like is so different. But first of all, I'm excited to, catch up with you in a few months when the season starts and you've had a little time to venture out. But I know it's kind of a cliche question, but for people who are not as in tune with college hoops, I think we all just see the press releases when a kid commits, whatever. Take us through, like, what is that first, 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks like? Especially now, I feel like the last year or two, it feels like there's kind of more of an understanding of we're probably going to lose most of, if not all of our roster. I think even the early portal years, you would kind of hope to keep 4 or 5 guys. And now, you look at a lot of places, they're just starting completely from scratch. But for people that kind of watch from a distance but don't know, I know you just kind of laid out some of it, but take us through the first 6, 8 weeks on a job like this.
Well, we had to look at the roster and figure out who we felt like we wanted to keep, and then who had already made the decisions to leave, and have those conversations. And those were pretty quick conversations, because we felt like we were going to be losing a bulk of the roster for a variety of reasons, and probably, best for them to move on, best for us, start fresh. We talked to a couple guys about staying. It didn't ultimately, I think, work out. And so we said, hey, we're just going to start over really from scratch and build the roster. What you'd like to do, as you know, is have a degree of continuity from year to year. We were fortunate, even at Ohio State, Butler before the transfer crazy stuff, to retain most of our good players. We had some young players transfer and then grow into good players. But for the most part, our leading scorers, our main players either came back or in some cases went on to the NBA earlier than what we anticipated. In a couple cases, we had back-to-back one and dones we weren't necessarily anticipating, which was great for them. But I think for us, if we can have a degree of roster continuity, and that's what we really tried to target, is some guys that will have multiple years, not a bunch of last year in their eligibility guys, a few, but not a ton. Guys who will have multiple years. Also guys that have some type of a pull to this region, Aaron, like, what's bringing them here outside of just opportunity to play? We want it to be some type of pull. They like the city. They like the idea of playing in the Big East. They like the idea, as crazy as it sounds in today's climate, of finishing and getting a DePaul degree. Those things, playing now in front of their family. We feel like those things can keep those guys here as we build this early in the process.
Yeah, I heard you say that in another interview. I found that interesting. The cliche back in the day, right? Anywhere that you took over a job, but especially a place like DePaul, we knew the great high school scene and all that. And, you got to keep all the Chicago players home, this, that, the other thing. I feel like that's almost like the new norm is you're going to lose guys, but it can be a great bounce back spot. And bounce back, by the way, sounds negative, but that's just the term in basketball that we use, or football that we use, of you're from here, but then you leave, but you decide you want to come back. I mean, obviously you'd love to get great players if they want to be at DePaul out of high school, but it also feels like there's a lot of great players that maybe make that decision to go out west or go to the SEC or go to the whatever, and maybe it doesn't work out, or maybe they're just homesick or whatever. And it feels like that DePaul is a great spot for those type players.
Well, why wouldn't we take advantage of that? Because I do think there's so many good players in the city and in the suburbs. You're not going to get everybody, you're just not. You're not going to get you're not even going to get everybody that you want. That's the reality. I do think we'll certainly get some on the front end coming out of high school, but why not look at it as a great opportunity for kids to come back? Maybe they went somewhere else. They weren't quite good enough at the time to play in the Big East. They've went somewhere else, and then they want to challenge themselves against the best competition in the country in college basketball, or certainly one of the best. Why not have this place that attracts so many good players as a destination, either on the front end, or make no apologies about having them as an option on the back end of their career. And we fully embrace that, and are looking forward to tapping into that market.
I didn't even ask you off the top. Just tell us a little bit about DePaul. I mean, we all know the history of Final Fours and everything a while ago. We know that as of late, it has not been as good, but you've been there now 2 months, whatever it's been. I mean, take us through why the job interested you, besides obviously the beautiful backdrop and the good food and all that stuff. But what intrigued you about the job, and maybe tell us a little bit about stuff that we don't know about the gig and the school and all that stuff.
Well, DePaul's located in a great area in the city called Lincoln Park. Beautiful area. You probably know it. It's a great neighborhood. It's where a lot of the Bulls and the Cubs live. And it is a really nice, so it's this campus, smaller campus smack in the middle of incredible shopping and restaurants and beautiful houses, but it's city life. I think that's what I didn't recognize, is how nice the area was. That's first. Like, I didn't recognize how nice, or realize how nice the area is. I had a guy from Brandon Bailey who was on my staff at Ohio State, who was in the NBA, and he was like, Coach, you're going to be blown away by how nice the area is around DePaul. So that was a bit of a surprise for me. The move to Wintrust was important about 7 years ago from Allstate Arena to Wintrust has been really important and I think pivotal because it's closer. It's 20 minutes from campus. It's still not, you'd love to have a place on campus. Everybody would, but it's fine. Other places, and it's where the NBA Combine is. It's a gorgeous arena, great college basketball size, 10,000, perfect size. So I think those two things you mentioned, we've had some struggles here recently. And the reality is, if we're all being honest, you look at the stats and it's been more than recently, right? It's been 20 plus years. We're the longest tenured program to not in the power 4, 5, 6, whatever you want to look at, to not make the NCAA tournament. It's been 20 years. We're the longest tenured program not to do that. Our average, I think we've finished either last or second to last in the Big East, 14 to 19 years. So you look at it and you say, okay, hey, why is that? And there are a variety of reasons. And some of it had to do with the facility. What I tend to look at right now, Aaron, is the fact that, hey, there's a real commitment from Dwayne Peavy and Rob Manuel, our president, and the board to say, hey, let's really work at making a commitment to be a relevant college basketball program. And that's the challenge in front of us. And it is a challenge. And I think the appeal of the job was, in fact, that I've been open. I didn't have to take a job. I didn't have to, work for a year or two. I could have sat out. I was advised really to sit out. I just think once I talked to Dwayne, once I talked to Rob, and once I had multiple conversations with them. They flew to my house, and then I had Zooms with them and trying to vet everything. New practice facility in 2 years is going to be huge for us. I just felt like there was some momentum, and this was the time to do it.
For people who don't know, Dwayne Peavy was, longtime Kentucky, associate AD, all that stuff. Tell us, for people who don't know, I mean, I know Dwayne a little bit. I find him to be one of the people I like the most in this business. Tell us a little. I know he's your new boss. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but a lot of people probably know the name. He was kind of John Calipari's right-hand man at Kentucky. And from my experiences with him, I just think totally gets what this new era of college sports is about, how to get fans interested, people interested, all that stuff.
Yeah, he's great. He's great. I think I called Cal about him, and I got to know John. John's been someone I've gotten to know a little bit here in the last few years. Obviously, I grew up in Lexington, Kentucky, and had so much admiration for what John did there at Kentucky. And he called me, right after things happened at Ohio State. He called me literally that afternoon. We had a long conversation, and he talked a little bit about his experiences with the Nets and other places, and he was great. So I called him when I was considering this job, and I said, "Tell me about Dwayne." He said, "Dwayne's great. Dwayne's great." He said, "Now he's young in the profession, so to speak. This is his first AD job, but he's great. You'll love him. He's a worker. He understands. He gets it. He's seen high level success, and I found that to be true with Dwayne. And I think what you're looking for in any AD is someone who's going to be right alongside you and work, and that you're going to be in alignment with, and it's going to be really committed and wants it as bad as you want it, so to speak. And then also someone you can trust. And I feel confident in those things with Dwayne, and that's exciting.
Very good. Couple more, we'll get you out of here. First of all, Big East. I mean, I mentioned off the top, everybody knows, but I did go to University of Connecticut. It's been a couple good years.
Ooh.
Obviously, Coach Hurley, is operating at the highest level. But listen, it's Coach Hurley, but it's Rick Pitino, it's Sean Miller. It's there's just a lot of talent. I mean, how excited? I mean, listen, you're coming from the Big Ten. It's not as though you weren't playing great teams, great programs every night there. But the Big East is, it's a beast right now, and obviously, starting with UConn.
It really is. I said this the other day on an interview. I do think we'll all look back in 20 years at what UConn has done and be even more impressed, which is because if you talk to coaches are blown away with what UConn did the last 2 years. And I think we're going to be even more impressed. And it's a credit to Dan, his staff, the university, and most importantly, the players, the just what they did and what Dan did and that whole, it just is amazing. So
can I cut you off here for a second, Coach? Because even at the Final Four, like I said this the night of the championship, is you go back and Florida in '07, it was an incredible story, but the whole story was the whole starting five decided to come back, which is cool. It's awesome in and of itself.
Yes.
Duke back in the day, it was an era where the best players stayed 4 years. I don't think people even in real time appreciated it, where it's like they lost 3 players to the NBA, 2 were drafted, 1 signed. So can you expand? This is about DePaul. We don't want to make this a UConn conversation, but I'm curious why you say that, because I'm totally in agreement. Was even in real time, it was like, I don't think we're fully appreciating this as much as people should.
I don't think we did. I don't think we did. And what Florida did was amazing. But I don't think, like, I think what UConn did in this new era is really more impressive in a lot of ways. It's hard to take anything away what Florida did, but I just think that the way that this thing, how this thing goes with just the freedom of movement and what UConn has done and the dominance they showed in back-to-back NCAA tournaments, and doing it in a new era where you're not sure exactly what your team's going to look like. Now, they retained a lot of guys, but as you mentioned, they lost several guys to the NBA. It just speaks to their player development. It speaks to the program that they intended to get rolling, you know, when Danny took the job there. And I just think as we're watching it as people who love college basketball, you know, I'm sitting at home saying, damn, this thing we might not see this for a while. It is that impressive. And I'm sure they're going to try to three-peat. But it just was really impressive.
Now you get to face it 2 times a year. You know, I mentioned it, but anything else that stands out now that you have a chance? You were in the Big East, for people who forget. You were at Butler for a number of years before you went to Ohio State, but obviously new league, new everything. But again, not only UConn, but Rick Pitino, Ed Cooley's in a new spot. Kim English has things rolling. Just your perspective on the league as a whole, and how you get to now you get to compete with those guys every night.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some of the coaches, Shaheen. You mentioned like what Seton Hall has done. Ed's phenomenal. You know, Thad has done it as well as anybody in the past couple decades. Sean, you mentioned Rick. You know, Mac is great. It's as good a league coaching wise as I can honestly recall. Shaka with what he's doing at Marquette in short order. And I think when you're in my position and you're saying, okay, hey, you know, what do? Do you sit? Do you wait a year? You know, coaches like to coach, but maybe taking a year off is good, do media, whatever. You know, the challenge of DePaul was appealing. The coaching in this league was appealing. And it was, man, you get a chance to continue to coach. Big Ten had tremendous coaches. You get to continue to coach against some of the really icons in the sport, and some of the guys that have done it so well for so long. And I think as a competitor, that becomes an appealing thing. And it'll feel maybe different in January and February.
Sure, yeah.
But it's exciting, and I know it'll be a lot of fun to go challenge night in, night out against the coaches in this league.
2 quick ones will get you out of here. One, the first one is, you were only out of the game for a couple weeks, literally. But you know, is there anything that from a distance, whether it was watching UConn's run, or because I just think about even the coaches that you mentioned just in the Big East, forget, you know, the Big 12, the SEC, whatever, but Shaka does it so different than Dan Hurley does it. Dan Hurley does it so different than whoever. Rick Pitino does it. And I was just curious, is there anything that, whether it was talking to people, maybe you got to a practice or two, or just watching on TV, that you were like, oh crap, this is pretty cool, I might, you know, try to implement more of this in my next spot?
Yeah, a little bit. I was able to go. What I tried to do during that period was, one, clear my head, you know, make sure my family was in a good place, and as good a place as you can be in when you're going through something like that. Clear my head, you know, just kind of get to some fresh air. And then I wanted to see some of my assistants who were head coaches or who were coaching at different places, and follow them. So I got a chance to do that. And then, you know, I got a chance to, you know, I went and spent 3 days down at Texas A&M with Buzz for a couple of days, and I didn't know Buzz great at the time. We were friends, but I really got a great appreciation for him. They were right in the middle of of a tough stretch where they had lost a few in a row and they were on the bubble. And I told them was on the bubble my second year at Butler and my second year at Ohio State. And both years we went through and won a game. And I said, you're going to do that too. I really believe that. You just have those conversations. I think what it reminded me of is just how challenging our jobs can be in those months when you're going through something like he was going through, where he's just in an incredible league and he's battling every night. And so we would go on walks and talk through some things. I think that gave me good perspective, Aaron. I think seeing them practice and how he was doing things. And then I also was able to stop and see a few other guys practice for a minute, just at some spots when I was just traveling. And that was really good to see. And probably the highlight was getting a chance to see some of my former assistants who are head coaches now and see them win a game or two that they needed to win. That was a lot of fun.
That's cool. Learn from Buzz Williams. Make sure to bring more than one suit and outfit to the game, because guy changes. The only guy in the business changes at halftime. Last question, in all seriousness, we got the Chicago skyline in the background. I've been a million times. It's an amazing city. It's also an amazing sports city. Like, you go, just walking the streets. I mean, I'm not even kidding. And I know you know this, but like, you see, not only, it's not just a one sport town or whatever. You see Blackhawks jerseys, you see Bears jerseys, even when the team wasn't good. And hopefully they're in the middle of kind of rebirth as well. Like, how do you build that excitement, but also have you allowed yourself to like envision a moment where you guys do make a tournament run? Because I could imagine the city kind of really wrapping its arms around you guys when you guys ultimately have success.
For sure. There's no question. As hungry as this city is for a champion, a winner, they're really hungry to see a program like DePaul experience success, get back to a relevant level in college basketball. I've heard that over and over. Coach, you do all these meet and greets now in these first couple of months. Coach, this city is on fire. When DePaul becomes successful, it will be unlike anything you've seen. And I do believe that because, I've heard that a ton. The challenge for us is to put in the daily work every day to seeing that dream and that vision become a reality. It really is in the work where that happens. So that's what's in front of us. But I've heard this over and over, like this city, after 20 years of not, hearing their name called on Selection Sunday longer than any other power program, they're craving it. And that's exciting. That's exciting because there is a real hunger for that among people at DePaul and people around the city.
Yeah, all I could say to that is I remember even talking to buddies in the media at this time last year when at this point last year, it was obvious that Rick Pitino was the St. John's head coach, but even in the lead up, they were like, dude, we haven't, St. John's, I think the stat is they haven't won a tournament game since 99. And they were like, when he gets this thing going, and you could even see it in the Big East tournament this year, they win that Thursday semifinal. They have the UConn game on Friday night. And like my buddies that cover the team or were around the team, and they were like, New York City was absolutely on fire. So I could imagine it is the same for DePaul. So Coach Chris Holtman, man, it's a crazy time. I know how stretched thin you are. So I appreciate you making a couple minutes here talking with us. And, like I said, we'll be watching. I'm excited. I'm coming to Chicago anyway. So I hope to catch a DePaul game there, maybe a practice over the summer. We'll eat some pizza, man, but I appreciate the time. I know that's cliche, but the pizza is very good. I appreciate the time, and we will talk again soon, okay?
My pleasure, and great spending time with you.